Hey everybody, welcome to Around the Nation, right here at TYT Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Welcome to the show. Got a good show for you guys here today. We do have, of course, some obligatory Trump disaster stories, including a new poll about what American voters think about the Trump administration, especially about the chaos after all the recent firings and staff replacements. That's a fun story. Then we have the new White House chief of staff is teaming up with General Mattis, apparently, to babysit Trump. That's fun. And then, of course, some candid words about what he thinks about living in the White House. Then we've got some serious matters. We're going to go from fun to disastrous, including the next financial disaster. Oh boy. And then Sinclair Broadcasting, that story from yesterday about what Sinclair is doing and how it's going to impact the news, local news in your area. So that, of course, is a very heavy story. So again, we're gonna lead in with some of the light stuff and have a little bit of fun, and then get into much more serious topics. So we'll start out with, of course, that new poll. Now, before I get into the stories, of course, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody who watches the live stream. Make sure to share this stream and like it if you like the show. Also, I want to encourage people to use the super chat and to start doing more social media. So what I want to do is I want to start reading comments during the show. Super chat is obviously my preferred method because let's be honest, get a little bit of money. But if you don't want to use a super chat, that's fine. You will guaranteed read your comment if you do a super chat. But I also want to do Twitter as well. So you can tweet me at Jeff's Politics or at TYT Nation. And I will read your tweets on air as well. So I want to read some tweets. I want to read some super chats. And I really want to get some audience feedback on the stories, or just general comments that you want to say during the stories. So I'm always interested in that. So yeah, if you want to take advantage of that, that is definitely preferred. I do want to make this interactive. So, or else it's just me yelling at the screen all day. So, and we know how fun that is. All right. Anyway, so again, before I get into the segments today, another I have a group of people to thank, of course, and that is the patrons, patreon.com/TYT Nation. I've got some names here. We have Stephen Nordby, Karen Fogelsong, Benjamin Squires, Jacob Torrey, Rogue X, Chris Heimbuck, Enrique Portera, J.E. Dinglis, Linda S. Gertz, Elizabeth Uval, Nago John, somebody simply going by the name of L, Colin Barber, JCD, Don C., Chris Robato, Erica Lowe, Joe Roberts, Grant Keeling, Michael Drum, Mitch Craik, Princeton Mason, Susan Garbowitz, Sandra Newman, Jackie Purpura, Corey Kohlberg, Tom Dreyer, the librarian, that name that I can never say, 03MTA30, or 30, sorry, not a 0. Thank you. Lelaine Williams, Nicole S. Galjanik, Jeff Curry, Hollis Hopkins, Alvin Berger, and just Julian Davis. So thank you. Again, I'm starting from the beginning, and I want to get through all the names and thank all the patrons who support independent progressive media. Thank you. I appreciate you helping us continue to stay afloat during the difficult times. Of course, where we were not seeing a lot of ad revenue, so I want to thank you for that, helping to keep the show going. So, and to help keep us growing in the future. So, thank you. All right. Anyway, now with all of that, let's get into the stories. Let's have a little fun. Boom. And boom. Okay. Now, with the recent shakeup of the White House staff within the last week, For example, you've got Sean Spicer gone, Reince Priebus gone, and now Anthony Scaramucci gone. The Mooch. We'll have a story on that later. The White House seems to be in a little bit of chaos. There seems to be a little disaster. Sad. We're not winning with this White House. There is no winning going on. Now, this is despite, of course, Donald Trump saying, no, there's absolutely no problem with the White House. It's not in chaos. In fact, everything is fantastic. Everything's awesome. He tweeted, highest stock market ever. Best economic numbers in years. Unemployment lowest in 17 years. Wages raising. Border secure. SC, no White House chaos. Look, a lot of those things are debatable at best. Especially since, wait a minute, how are the borders secure when you haven't built the wall? I thought the whole point of building the wall was to secure the borders. Just saying. As far as the stock market, that doesn't actually represent regular Americans whom you claimed to represent. Again, debatable. Okay. Now, what is not debatable is the majority of Americans who are saying that this administration, the Trump administration, the Trump White House, is in absolute chaos. Unless you've been living under a rock, you have probably seen like, oh, wow, they've gone through a lot of people. They've gone through a lot of White House chiefs of staff. They've gone through some communications directors. A lot of people are getting fired. There's also the Russia investigation. There's also the firing of Comey. There's also the numerous White House leaks that they're very worried about when it comes to classified information. Anybody who's been paying attention to the news knows that, wow, there's some, maybe they won't call it a chaos or a disaster, but at least they would think, boy, they got some problems in the White House with staffing, and they really need to tamp it down and do something about it. Now, let me give you the results of this new Politico Morning Consult poll. Now, it was conducted last Thursday through Saturday. This was before the Mooch was fired, gone, okay? Now, still, according to this poll, again, this is before the Mooch, 60% of Americans say that the White House is running somewhat or very chaotically, compared with the 33% of people who say it is running well. Oh, really? So 33% of people that were polled here, well, they looked at the White House and looked at things that were going on, and they're like, perfect. This is a well-oiled machine. Okay? Oh, it looks fantastic. Things are going really, really, really well. Or look, hey, maybe those 33%, to be fair, maybe they've set their expectations super low. And like, I don't know, at least the thing's not on fire. I mean, that's something, right? The country hasn't imploded yet. You know what? Not in chaos. Anyway, now let me give you more of a breakdown of what this says. According to the poll in general, voters have a low opinion of how Trump's White House is operating. Fewer voters, 29%, say that Trump's staff serves him well, compared to 39% who say that his staff does not serve him well. Hey man, I got news for you guys. I mean, you're talking about the staff, but it ain't the staff. That's not entirely, at least. Now, yes, the staff, obviously, there's some big issues with some of the people that are working in the White House or were working in the White House and then got fired, obviously. But the problem here is that it really kind of starts at the top. That's where the problem begins. At the top, it starts with you. It starts with the boss. Now, Trump, look, and this is not exactly coming, like, you could be a conservative and have the same opinion that Donald Trump has shown very little leadership when it comes to doing legislation. In fact, on the recent healthcare legislation, Donald Trump was told by Mitch McConnell, you need to stay out of it. Don't try to help us. Don't tweet anything about it. Just shut up and let us do our job. Let us try to negotiate this piece of legislation. And Donald Trump's like, okay, well, I can go on. oh, I'll go and tweet about different things. I'll tweet about Russia. I'll tweet about all this, and I'll go golfing. Sure, I can stay out of it. I don't really care about policy either. All I want is a win. Mitch McConnell, give me a win. Okay. So as far as leadership, what did Republicans call that when something that Donald Trump or the president, sorry, is supposed to lead on a topic, but they decide to let Congress, specifically the Senate, lead? Oh, right. They called that leading from behind. Well, you can say that Donald Trump's certainly been leading from behind, if he's leading at all. Now, I've reported, and Politico has done some great pieces on this, where Trump's White House inside the atmosphere is basically that of infighting, right? Consistent competition, backstabbing, people walking around on eggshells. Now, they're worried whether or not they're going to be fired or not. It seems to have led to a pretty disastrous atmosphere. And it makes me think that, he's running the White House like he's running one of his businesses, essentially under the ground, with hyper competition within the ranks, and him essentially saying, I don't know, you two fight each other while I sit here and receive all sorts of praise from you guys. Because that's what he's looking for. I mean, most of the staff is jockeying for favor and for power, okay? They want better jobs, and essentially what they're doing is they're walking around with a dagger they can slip in somebody's back in order to get that position, in order to get a better job. You know who's angling for example, White House press secretary? That is Kellyanne Conway. And she gave a hilarious interview on Fox News where she's doing nothing but praising the president. Oh, he's doing such a fantastic job. He's doing such a great job. She knows Donald Trump's watching Fox News, and the person who praises him the most and is loyal to him often gets the job. So, guess what? She's now in the running for White House press secretary. So, there you go. Now, look, that's basically how this White House works, okay? Instead of being a team, they're all on their own. They're all fighting each other. And while some people say, well, that's good for when you're in a business environment, I don't even agree with that. It's terrible in a business environment. And it's also terrible for politics. At least not unless you want to get anything done. If you don't want to get anything done, it's great. Works awesome. Now, and look, again, I talked about loyalty, right? But you also have to remember, part of the shakeup is that Donald Trump had some of the most loyal people in these positions, and they still ended up getting thrown on the bus. And again, I can think of Corey Lewandowski, Paul Manafort, and Anthony Scaramucci. So because of all that, again, everybody's walking on eggshells. In addition for walking out to each other, it's a very cutthroat environment, and that's pretty much a disaster, okay? So that's why this is chaos. And a lot of people, they look at this and like, yeah, it's chaotic. Look at all the bullshit that's been happening behind the scenes. And we can do that thanks to the leaks, which is another example of the fact that there is so much chaos. And now, but of course, the results differ when you break it down by party affiliation, of course. More Republicans tend to think, hey, that environment's actually super awesome. And Donald Trump's doing a great job. It's not chaotic at all. In fact, 63% of Republicans say it is running well. Although, there is about more than a third, 34% that say it is running chaotically. So at least a third of Republicans seem to be paying attention. Now, I have a couple of other interesting tidbits in this poll that I want to talk about. Now, one of the questions was, when making a policy decision, do you believe President Trump mostly listens to the advice of advisors or mostly does what he wants to do? Again, I've talked about this before on how he would listen to advisors. And look, even one of his lawyers or one of his former lawyers had talked about Trump listens to the advice of his lawyers and then later on disregards it. So they tell him not to tweet and he goes on and tweets anyway. So when you tell him to do something, he's like, oh, yeah, got it. I'm going to go do the opposite. So, they asked the voters, well, does Trump listen to his advisors? Does he listen to his lawyers? And overwhelmingly, they said, no. No, of course not. 68% of respondents said Trump does mostly what he wants to do. That shouldn't be surprising. Of course he does mostly what he wants to do. He's regularly ignoring advice from his cabinet, from his advisors. I thought he was going to surround himself with the best people so he could do the best job he could. No. He's just doing whatever the fuck he wants to do. And we never know with him. He's a wild card. Now, what's more important is that 68% of Americans are like, okay, yeah, he does whatever he wants to do. Now, they followed up with asking, do you believe that's a good thing or do you believe that's a bad thing? Well, shocker, 75% of Americans are like, bad thing. Bad thing. Very, very bad. Very bad. Do not let Trump do what he wants to do, because it is always bad. Because what he wants to do is go around and of course, undermine his communications people by tweeting out something ridiculous. Look, a lot of it has to do with Twitter. Like the recent order on, for example, banning transgender people from the military, which really wasn't an order, it's just a tweet. He actually didn't even send an actual order. And he goes out and tweets it, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff are like, what the fuck? General Mattis is like, what are you doing? We didn't even get an order. And hey, sorry, dude, but a tweet is not an order. You're going to have to send it through the proper channels, through the chain of command. Now, has Trump done that yet? No. And he's not even talking about it anymore. So that's an example of Trump doing whatever he wants to do and not listening to his advisors and not following the proper procedures inside the White House. So, again, 75%, 3/4 of Americans are like, no, don't let him do what he wants to do. It is a bad thing. It is a terrible thing. So, I think what I get from this the most is that I think the American people realize that Donald Trump is a child who, runs a chaotic White House. Then they're not in favor of that. And he wants to do things that he shouldn't do. And that they agree that if you let him do that, that it's a bad thing. And maybe we shouldn't let him do that. Maybe he should sit down and actually listen to his advisors so he can actually get things done. But of course, he's not going to follow that advice. Because, again, Donald Trump, he's going to do what he's going to do because that's who he is. Sad. Okay. Let's move on, huh? Shall we? More fun stuff from Trump. Okay. I think I actually got the sidebars mixed up here. But, oh well, sad. Sad baby. We'll move on. Fuck it. We'll do it. We'll do it live. We'll do it anyway. Alrighty. Now, John Kelly is the new White House Chief of Staff. Of course, he was just recently brought in to replace outgoing Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Now, Priebus, look, this was a guy who was very quiet. Nobody really took him seriously. At least I didn't take him seriously. Now, the president also didn't take him seriously. In fact, according to insiders, Trump had once summoned Reince to the Oval Office to kill a bug that was bothering him. Is that not the saddest thing you will ever hear? Reince, hey, yeah, come to the Oval Office. Kill this bug. It's bothering me. And he did it. Again, oh, sad. Very sad. Now, I gotta ask, man. Hey, Reince, how much was your dignity worth? Hopefully it was a lot. Okay, but something's telling me it wasn't. Now, that's Reince Priebus. So now they get rid of him, and they bring in John Kelly. Now, John Kelly, as far as I can tell, is the opposite of Reince Priebus. So this is a guy who ran the Department of Homeland Security and is a former Marine. So it's pretty obvious that dude's not going to swat no flies for you. All right. Now, furthermore, he's not really there to suck up to Trump. Apparently, he's there to attempt to try to bring discipline into a very chaotic White House. Again, most Americans in a recent poll, a Politico Morning Consult poll, said that the Trump White House is at least somewhat or very chaotic. Okay. Well, so John Kelly, this is a guy who's like, I'm going to fix that. You bring me in, I restore some discipline, I crack down on some leaks, and I make sure that this actually runs very, very well. Okay. Now, but there's some interesting facts that came out from a recent Associated Press article. Now, it turns out that John Kelly, before he was elevated to the position of Chief of Staff at the Department of Homeland Security, when he was working there, he was working with James Mattis in order to clarify, bring some clarity to some of the executive orders from the Trump administration. Now, what do I mean by bring clarity? Well, basically to say, to point out that, hey, this isn't a blanket ban on Muslims. We actually have a lot of exceptions in here. In fact, here's a little bit of that article. It says, Kelly and Defense Secretary Jim Mattis were said to have been deeply frustrated with the rollout of Trump's refugee and immigration ban, and made clear to associates that they were not involved in drafting it or aware of its details around the time that Trump signed the original order. Both moved swiftly afterwards to address gaps in the measure, with Mattis asking that Iraqis who helped U.S. troops be exempt, and Kelly clarifying that green card holders would not be affected. So they didn't like this policy, and they're like, man, this sucks. Why don't we try to at least get some people exempt from this? Like, you can't just leave our Iraqi allies, those who have helped our troops, twisting in the wind. We got to do something for them. And, of course, green card holders, we got to put in some protections. And, okay, you want to give them a little bit of credit for that, that's fine. So there's that. Now, let me get into an account of how they've actually been dealing with Trump. Now, this, again, is John Kelly. Now, it said that Kelly had demanded to speak with the president alone after Trump loudly complained that the U.S. was admitting travelers from countries he viewed as a high risk. Now, Kelly, in that meeting, had first tried to explain to Trump that the admissions were standard. Hey, man, we bring in refugees and people all the time from disastrous areas because hey, these people are running from ISIS. These people are running from Assad. Maybe we should, allow them in. Maybe we should continue doing what we were doing before. And remember, one of the justifications is they go back to, well, I mean, look, Obama did it. No, that's not necessarily true. He did slow down the processing of visas in order to properly vet them even more. It didn't stop. It just slowed them down. So it wasn't a ban. Donald Trump's stupid. He watches Fox News. He's like, oh, Obama did it. You know why? Steve Doocy said so. Well, Steve Doocy's wrong. Or whoever said that on Fox News. Or whatever conservative media he watches, they didn't actually ban Muslims. So his Muslim ban is effectively different than Donald Trump's slowing down of refugees. Okay. Now, anyway, Kelly tried to explain that to Trump and said, hey, man, what we're doing for refugees is standard, man. So people have legitimate reasons to visit this country from those areas. But the president had insisted that, no, what this is doing is that, well, people coming in from these countries, it makes me look bad. That's his reasoning. It's not that it's a security risk and we need to do something about it to maybe vet these people a little bit more. No. The people coming into this country make him look bad because he's actually letting actual refugees in. That's the problem here. That's the issue that Trump had. That makes me look bad. See, it's all about optics with him. He doesn't care about policy. He doesn't care that it's bad policy that doesn't actually make sense. No. All he cares about is, does it make me look good? Doesn't make me look bad. I made a promise to ban the Muslims. If I don't do it, it's going to make me look bad. Ridiculous, right? Now, not only that, but Kelly then demanded that other advisors leave the room so that he could speak to the president frankly. Trump refused at first, but agreed when Kelly insisted. So I think that's relevant, right? Because there's a couple of reasons, right? For one, John Kelly is showing that he's not going to put up with bullshit. He was like, oh, no, I want to talk to you alone about this immediately. Get everyone the hell out of here because I've got something to say. I need to speak to you frankly. Oh, no, well, I don't really want to. My Steve Bannon and, we got these other guys in here. No. You don't understand, Mr. President. I need to speak with you now. He's not going to take shit, okay? Now, the other reason that it's relevant is because we know from different news reports and from who Donald Trump is that he essentially listens to the last person in the room. So John Kelly knows this. I'm pretty sure he's read the reports and he's like, I'm going to be the last person in the room. And I need to talk to him about this. So, and look, generally, at least that gets the idea through to his head that somebody else isn't talking him out of it. But at the same time, Donald Trump's still going to do what Donald Trump's going to do. Okay? So he's still likely not to listen to you, but you have a better chance, at least if you're the last person in the room. Now, the same administration official, by the way, who told us about that, and it's an anonymous official because they're inside the White House, they said that Madison Kelly had agreed that in the earliest weeks of Trump's presidency, that one of them should remain in the United States at all times to keep tabs on the orders rapidly emerging from the White House. So that's interesting, right? Again, this is the first few weeks of Trump's presidency. Madison and Kelly sit down and they're like, this guy's insane. And the shit that's coming out of the White House, we need to watch it. So, look, we're going to arrange our travel plans that if you got to go out of the country for your role, one of us is going to be here. Okay, I'm going to stay behind or you're going to stay behind. And we're going to watch and try to get ahead of all the different policy bullshit that Trump tries to put out. So, how'd that work out? Not very well. Last week it was revealed that Mattis only had 1 day's notice of Trump's ban on transgender persons serving in the military and was reportedly appalled by the decision. Now, again, Mattis is the defense secretary. Now, you think the defense secretary would actually be part of this decision. Sadly, the way that the Trump White House works is that it wasn't. In fact, this was Trump's decision and Trump's decision alone. Now, I had people arguing, no, you don't understand. The military, that's what the military wants. No, the military doesn't want it. In fact, the generals, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, were blindsided, and they also disagree with this position. And in fact, Mattis also, as you can see, he was appalled. Now, look, back in June, he said, let's do a 6-month review to make sure that we're not losing any sort of combat effectiveness with transgender people that are serving in the military. So he started that review. It had been 1 month. It was supposed to be a 6-month review. And Trump just puts out a random tweet saying, I banned the transgender from the military without actually putting in the orders and going through the chain of command. So that's enough reason to be appalled. Like, even if you're not in favor of transgender people in the military and you're a military person, just that flagrant disrespect for the chain of command and trying to put out an executive order via tweet would be enough to make you appalled if you're somebody who actually values structure and order. Somebody like John Kelly, who values structure and order. So, now, one more quote here before I wrap this up, and that's from David B. Cohen, a University of Akron political science professor. Now, look, what he was thinking about in this quote is that he's like, okay, well, look, you've got John Kelly, right, who's going to try to instill some order in the White House. Well, how long is it going to take before Trump starts to undercut him? Because he doesn't like what Trump is doing, or he doesn't like what Kelly is doing. Trump doesn't. So this is his quote. He said, President Trump is his own worst enemy. He instinctively likes to be his own chief of staff, and he's a pretty awful one. So look, basically he's giving a warning here, like, hey, watch out. It's not going to be long, in my opinion, before Trump tries to undermine Kelly. He's a child, and look, what this boils down to is that before he even got the position, Kelly and Mattis sat down to try to babysit Trump. That's pretty sad. That's pretty sad. Again, he says, well, I'm going to try to bring some more to the White House. I'm going to do the best that I can. You need structure. I'm the structure guy. I'm the guy to go to, right? But order, unfortunately, for Kelly starts at the top. And if Trump doesn't want to listen to you, he doesn't have to. After all, he's got the authority. He is the boss. Okay? And look, John Kelly, he can fire the aides. He can fire people like Scaramucci, which he did. But Trump, it's ultimately the source of the dysfunction inside of the White House. You can't get rid of that. I mean, people could. But right now, it's very unlikely that we're going to get rid of that through any other means. And so far, unfortunately, for people working in the White House who actually do value order and structure, no one's been able to tamp down on Donald Trump's worst tendencies. Tendencies to tweet, to call out, to attack the media, to attack his opponents very viciously, and, you know, to ignore things like LGBT month and to come out with just disastrous executive orders without doing any of the research or going through the chain of command. Nobody's been able to stop that. Nobody's been able to counsel him against that because ultimately Trump does what Trump's going to do because that's who he is. So, look, you know, part of me is like, yeah, we would like a little bit of sanity in the White House. At least, you know, at least some, okay? But then, again, part of me is like, if it's still insane, then are they going to get anything done? And the stuff that they want to do is rather disastrous. So there's also that side. But no matter what side you go to, you're, you know, basically, if you are on the side of order, you're going to wish John Kelly a lot of luck because he's going to need it. And if you're on the side of chaos, well, then you're going to hope that Trump is going to continue to be Trump. Okay. That's it on that. Let's move on. All right. One more Trump story before we get into something far more serious. Now, President Trump is apparently not a huge fan of the White House. That's a little odd, right? Especially since he ran an entire campaign in order for him to get there, okay? But no, like, I don't actually mean the office of the presidency, which I'm kind of sure that he's had some second thoughts on. Like, oh, I didn't realize being president was going to be this hard. But no, I actually mean the actual house, in which he had recently called a real dump. According to Golf magazine, President Trump recently told a group of members at his of his golf club in Bedminster, and this is people who have actually paid to be part of this golf club, that the reason he went to the property so often, that he went golfing so often, is because the White House is, quote, a real dump. Now, that magazine, of course, recently profiled the president, and this quote was published on Tuesday and will appear in Sports Illustrated later. Now, this comment, in context, it said, chatting with some members before a recent round of golf, he explained his frequent appearances. The White House is a real dump, he said. Now, the publication wrote that the president was, quote, often at his most unguarded among the people who pay for their proximity to him. So, look, before I get into some of the reasons why this is ridiculous, I just have to point out that these people are close to him simply because he's getting their money. They're paying a lot of money just to be close to this guy who's going to go and trash the White House. But number one, okay, look, you want to say the White House is dumb? That's like your opinion, man. Gee, I'm sorry that the White House, in which you get to live for free on our taxpayer money, is not up to your high fucking standards. Number two, fuck off. But number three, most importantly, look, he's wasting your money. First, he's wasting your money to go golfing. And while he's there, again, he's unguarded around the people who pay. Who knows what kind of bullshit he's telling them. And that third thing, actually, is kind of why him golfing so much is sort of a national security risk. Now, you might think, oh, come on, Jeff, that's ridiculous. Why is golfing or going to these resorts a national security risk? Well, look, normally I would think for most presidents, you think, okay, you want to hit the links on the weekend every once in a while, get away from the stress of being president. That's absolutely fine. You want to do that? Okay. But with Trump, he's already shown that he has no regard for national security. Now, let me give you an example. Now, there were reports of a party at Mar-a-Lago, right, where there was a guy who had the nuclear football. The guy with the nuclear football just happened to be photographed in a selfie, and then having that selfie posted on social media. But the guy who has the nuclear football, you're not supposed to know who he is. But they know who he is. We saw him. Now people know who he is. That includes possible foreign agents who want to steal our nuclear secrets. That's a bit of a problem. Now, that same get-together had the president and his top aides monitoring North Korean missile launches. Now, they've got their government-issued laptops and they got their phones. In fact, they're using their phones as flashlights. Okay, and important national security documents related to this all strewn around and right in the view of people who are in the country club, guests of the country club. Again, this is an area, and look, we don't have any evidence that there were any, but it's possible that foreign agents could have easily gotten some of that classified material. You want to talk about how a private server is insecure, which it is. This is actually much worse than a private server because it's right out in the open saying that, hey, if you want to take a picture of it and put it on social media, well, you can do that. And by the way, here's a selfie with the nuclear football guy. Ridiculous. But he doesn't care. In fact, last November, the president-elect hosted a cocktail reception and dinner at Bedminster the same weekend that he was holding interviews at the club with candidates for his cabinet. Now, Golf magazine also reported that at the dinner, Trump addressed the members of the club by saying, quote, "This is my real group. You are the special people. I see all of you. I recognize like 100% of you, just about." Well, their only reason that they're special is that they gave you money. Lots and lots of money. Of course he'd rather be there than be in the White House. But look, the point is he doesn't give a shit about national security, the White House, or even the office of the president. No, all he cares about is himself and golf. And look, that's why Trump, that's probably the real reason that he spent most of his weekends at Trump properties. That, and he's going to enrich himself by paying himself through your money. And he goes to Mar-a-Lago, he goes to the New Jersey Golf Club, Bedminster, or of course his golf course in Washington, D.C. In fact, this guy spent more money golfing on the golf course than any other president. Over 40 days so far at one of his golf properties. Look, not only is he not doing his job, but he's also costing us money. And that money, of course, since it is being spent on Trump properties, goes right back into his pocket. Everything that this guy does involves taking advantage of your money. He's a grifter. Look, he called the White House a dump while he lives there on our dime, golfs at his own resorts, and even charges people $200,000 a pop to possibly see him at Mar-a-Lago, his quote-unquote winter White House. using the office of presidency to enrich himself. That's what he does. He's a grifter. He's a grifter. He's a charlatan. He's a snake oil salesman. And everything he does to help himself. As far as his comments in the White House, I got one thing to say to that. Hey, Trump, if you don't like the White House that much, then you should fucking leave. Okay. That's very simple. It's a simple message. All right. So let's go to some serious stuff. Oh boy. Oh, look, I talk a lot about media consolidation on the national level, but it turns out it's actually a huge problem when it comes to local media as well. In fact, there's one specific media company that a lot of progressives and, media activists are worried about, and it's Sinclair Broadcasting. Sinclair Broadcasting is now being talked about as a rival to Fox News. Now, Politico had a great report back in December that actually highlighted why why people are so worried about them. And it has a lot to do with their reach. Now, one example they gave is the Trump interviews, right? Now, according to Politico, Sinclair would broadcast their Trump interviews across the country without commentary. And Kushner, and this is who they talked to. They talked to Jared Kushner. And he highlighted that Sinclair in states like Ohio reached a much wider audience, around 250,000 viewers, that networks like CNN, which reached somewhere around 30,000 viewers. Now, look, I don't have a problem with reach, but I do have a bit of a problem with media consolidation and, more importantly, propaganda. Now, journalist David Zurwick, who has covered local television for roughly 30 years, recently told CNN in a segment that Sinclair comes as close to classic propaganda as I think I've seen in 30 years of covering local television on national television. They're outrageous. Now, that's a pretty big charge, saying that Sinclair media, oh man, it's nothing but it's propaganda. And in fact, this is incredibly rank propaganda, and this is coming from somebody who would watch, who studied television, covered local television for 3 decades. So this is a guy who should know what he's talking about. And this guy is pointing out Sinclair as being somebody who's as close to propaganda as they can get, or that he's ever seen. Well, that would seem to suggest that there's a problem with Sinclair. Now, he says that whatever the White House says, President Trump believes there is voter fraud, and he sets up this commission to get data from the states, and the states rightfully push back because it's very intrusive data. Boris Epstein's piece on it ends with, the states should cooperate with President Trump. And that's the kind of stuff that is apparently being shown on Sinclair channels. Well, that's very interesting. Now, look, they have a bias, and I think having a bias is fine. I have a bias. All right. They like Trump. I don't like Trump. I don't really care about their message so much. I think that that's free speech, but how they're doing it is very problematic, and they're using propaganda-like tactics as well as media consolidation in order to get out that message. And I seem to have a problem with that. Now, according to Common Dreams, the Sinclair Broadcasting Group, as you could probably tell, has close ties to the Trump administration. But the problem is that they're forcing local stations to air pro-Trump, pro-government segments. Now, what does that sound like to you? It sounds like state TV. Now, this company is also being helped by the Trump FCC, which recently rolled back a key Obama administration regulation that prevented stations that are large like Sinclair from further expansion. Now, with that rule gone, Sinclair has purchased more than 42 more local stations from Tribune Media Company, they now extend their reach to 72% of American households. So that is very, very large for one company. 72%. So that's a huge reach. But wait, they actually want to increase that reach even further through more acquisitions. But what makes it worse is that Sinclair, once they take over your station, they start dictating what direction it's going to go. And the direction that they choose is overwhelmingly to the right. Sinclair and its digital news subsidiary Circa not only produce and send packages to their stations, they even write scripts that local anchors use to introduce their pieces. So they get a piece on, like, for example, the Iran deal, and they said, okay, this is how you want to frame it, that the Iran deal is terrible and we should rip it up. That's how the newscaster is going to present it. Again, that's a disaster, because what you're getting is you're not getting all the facts, right? You're getting a right-wing frame from the beginning. And of course, that framing is going to set up the entire segment to get the desired outlook, or to get the desired, I can't think of the word, the desired reaction, okay, from their audience, which is the Iran deal sucks, despite the facts on it, okay? And even if those facts are, if they have misleading pieces posing as fact. So, now, furthermore, they have these things called must-runs, right? Now, must-runs are, I mean, it's in the title, okay? You have to run it. And they're sent to every day to all local stations owned by Sinclair Broadcasting. And again, these are video reports that are centrally produced by the company. They're sent out, and they're said, you must run this piece. So, and the rules are that station managers around the country have to work them into the broadcasts over a period of 24 to 48 hours. These videos, the problem with those is that they often lack context or present any opposing viewpoints. In fact, the Portland Press Herald had a great report on what these broadcasts actually look like from a regular TV viewer. Now, they talked to somebody named Mark McCutcheon of South Portland. Now, he was watching WGME, it was a station now owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, and he was watching the newscast, as he had for a long time, and something came on that actually shocked him. He said, in the midst of local news, a taped commentary from President Trump's former special assistant, Boris Epstein, appeared on the screen, trumpeting the administration's position with what he thought selective use and abuse of facts. McCutcheon, a small business owner and political independent, describes the experience as surreal, extremely jarring, and so out of place with the friendly local broadcast for news people I've come to trust over the years. There was no rebuttal, no context, no alternative point of view, which is a situation that he found concerning. WGME TV, Channel 13, and WPFO TV, Channel 23, each carry segments 9 times a week on orders from their owner, the Maryland-based Sinclair Broadcasting Group, the nation's largest owner of local television stations, and an aggressive, unabashed disseminator of conservative commentary supporting the Trump wing of the Republican Party. Now, Craig Aaron, president and CEO of Free Press, a Washington-based group that opposes media consolidation, said, quote, "It's unheard of to have a company pushing one specific agenda, reaching so many people, and doing it in a way designed to evade local input." He continues, "The idea of having local stations offer an array of viewpoints is great, but what we get with Sinclair is one set of political leanings being broadcast everywhere." Now, look, some right-wingers will be like, oh my God, CNN, MSNBC. CNN and MSNBC have all hired right-wingers from the Trump administration to come in and offer their side of the view. Now, I think that it's actually terrible because most of what they say is actually bullshit, but they are offering a different point of view. But the segments here on Sinclair offer no rebuttal, no context, and no opposing view. That's propaganda. You're not getting the other side. So, and look, that's the kind of stuff that's being slipped into the 5 o'clock news, okay, into these news stations. And again, that is very problematic, not just for me from a progressive or a liberal perspective, but also from a factual perspective, because you're not getting the whole story when you prevent it from simply one point of view. And look, again, speaking of CNN, MSNBC, this is the kind of stuff that some conservatives accuse liberals of doing. Oh, all you're doing is indoctrinating people with CNN's fake news. Now, look, I've talked about bias in the media, and I think there is a bias in, CNN. I know CNN has a bias. I know MSNBC has a bias. I have a bias. But as far as the bias of, for example, most what they would call liberal media, I think it has not a liberal bias, not even a conservative bias. I actually think it has an establishment bias. For example, CNN protects the status quo. That's what they're about. MSNBC is also very pro-establishment, and Fox News we know is a media arm of the Republican Party. Now Sinclair, they take it much further than Fox News. They actually inject their opinion in must-runs into local straight news broadcasts. Not because the anchors are conservative or necessarily agree. And it's fine if you have a conservative anchor saying, hey, this is my viewpoint. The problem is that when they present that viewpoint as actual fact. And they're only doing this because a lot of their bosses tell them to do so or else they're going to get fired. Okay? And that is, of course, deeply disturbing. Now, it's one thing to have an opinion, but it's quite another to hand out talking points and must-run ads with a deeply one-sided framing. Now, could you imagine if George Soros ran a station like that? That said, okay, all you have to, so you're going to run a segment, you're going to run a must-run saying socialism is awesome. Now, what's going to happen? People are going to freak out. Why don't we just get back to, I don't know, talking about the news? I wouldn't recommend a station like Sinclair, and I also wouldn't recommend the fictional Soros station, okay? What I would actually recommend is that we stick to straight news and actual facts. Now, facts do tend to have a liberal bias. I'm not going to say that they don't. And that the current Republican Party keeps making shit up. They make things up. They make up alternative facts, and they have this alternative fact-free universe. And we've talked about that. In fact, we have a conservative commentator, Charlie Sykes, who also says, we spent the last 30 years building this fact-free universe that didn't exist before. Because back in the olden days, conservatives actually did agree on facts. They just differed on the way that they want to solve those issues. Now, today, you've got a party that doesn't believe that climate change has actually happened, despite massive amounts of evidence. They believe in trickle-down theory, which doesn't work. Look at Kansas. Look at all the places that it's been tried. And they believe in some mythical healthcare system that's actually never been tried. So patient-centered, freedom healthcare. Where the rest of the world, the rest of the developed world, is using a single-payer system that actually works. So this is that alternative universe. We can't even agree on the facts anymore. Even if we have different ways of approaching solving those issues that America faces, and that the world faces. Can't even agree on the facts. How can you have a conversation with the other side if you don't agree that the sky is blue? And some of the people will be calling it, no, liberal conspiracy, the sky is actually green. It's ridiculous. So that's the problem here. The problem is that we have a conservative media that is so off the rails. And now, instead of actually monitoring themselves and agreeing on facts, they're buying up more stations and they're pushing propaganda. And that, again, is a huge, huge problem. And look, one of the reasons or one of the ways that I think that we should actually solve this problem is with less media consolidation. We need to break up the big media giants, and that includes what you would consider liberal media. We also need to remove the profit motive from news broadcasts. This shouldn't be a business. This shouldn't be a profit motive. Because, again, stations that have a profit motive, and, again, I criticize MSNBC and CNN all the time for this, is that if you have a profit motive to not report on certain things, for example, Standing Rock or, fracking disasters, well, then you're not going to report on that because your parent company happens to be tied in those businesses and they will lose business. So that's, again, one of the major problems here. And we need to eliminate that profit motive We need to decorporatize the media and turn it into what it's supposed to be, nonprofit. Now, that doesn't mean giving media over to the government, because the government can have its own bias as well, pushing pro-government, pro-establishment policy. What news needs to be is that it needs to be unbiased, and it needs to be non-corporate funded. It needs to be truly independent, because that's the only way the people are actually going to get actual facts and to have actual real conversations about how to solve real problems. And Sinclair is not doing that, and that's why I believe that they're a big, big problem. They keep continuing to buy up local media, and they're setting up this conservative agenda, and they're blocking out dissenting opinions. And I think that is deeply dangerous for the discourse in this country, and of course for the institution of the free press. Okay. All right, one more. Now, there's a new report out in the Financial Times. Now, writer Frank Partnoff warned about the incoming financial crisis. Well, not that it's coming, actually, but that it's already here. Now, he explains that politicians have been essentially destroying any and all financial regulations that were made post-2008. Because of that, the conditions are ripe and set up for another massive financial meltdown. Now, let me get into the article and give you some quotes. Now, he writes that while the U.S. administration talks of repealing the Dodd-Frank bill, the reality is that regulators have been flouting the law for years, and now the shadow financial markets are frothing. Almost a decade after the global financial crisis, the sequel has arrived. Now, look, that is incredibly ominous. The writer's not pulling any punches here. He's saying, no, you understand, it's already here. We've already set the stage. And look, 2008 was a complete disaster. Now, interestingly enough, in 2008, we had Barack Obama come in to try to do something to end the recession. Now, he did some very unpopular things. I criticized him for example, bailing out the banks. And there seemed to be this little thing called Occupy that also felt the same way. They were also angry at the banks for and President Obama for bailing out those banks and not bailing out the taxpayer. However, got to give him credit for at least doing some stimulus that actually tried to help. Now, do you think we're going to get any of that with Donald Trump? I don't know, man. But my point is, okay, so the incoming meltdown of the economy, that is kind of a bold claim. The fact that we're heading into the next global financial crisis, again, extraordinary. So why does he think that is? Well, he explains. The central culprit this time is the collateralized loan obligation, or CLO. Like its earlier esoteric cousins, the CDO, a CLO bundles risky low-grade loans into attractive packages and high credit ratings. Now, wait a minute here. So these are risky low-grade loans, and yet they are being packaged in a so-called attractive package with very high credit ratings. Well, that's weird, right? If they're risky and low grade, why have such a high credit rating? I don't quite understand. Like the fact that these loans are low grade, that's risk, right? So anybody who looks at that should look at that risk and be like, well, let's make a risk assessment. If we want to invest in this package, we should know that there's some sort of risk involved. Instead, credit rating agencies are going, no, these are great. These are AAA rated packages. You should buy them immediately. Immediately. But wait, these loan packages have a higher, likelihood of exploding. Why would you have a good credit rating? Well, it's to make people want to buy it, as I said. Investors buy these packages, and the sellers are essentially making money off what they consider to be junk. And a lot of these, instead of, like, we already did something like this when it came to home loans, now we're doing it with business loans. Now you get some examples here. In May, there were 2 deals of more than $1 billion each, and experts estimate that $75 billion worth are coming this year alone. Now, Terry's Capital recently closed a $2.1 billion CLO, the largest in the U.S. since 2006, and the third largest in history. Although most of the loans underlying these deals are of junk status, more than half of the new debt is rated AAA. Sound familiar? He asks. Yes, it actually sounds very familiar. In fact, I believe Senator Carl Levin of Michigan had a word for these kind of loans. Shitty. Now, he continues by offering some context. He said during the early 2000s, similarly high-rated deals called collateralized debt obligations, those CDOs, were very popular. At first, he said, they seemed harmless, or at least not so big that their collapse would cause financial contagion. But when regulators ignored your growth, they became more opaque and more profitable, with credit ratings disconnected from reality. So wait a minute. Back then they had the CDO that packaged up these low risk or these low grade, very risky loans, and they gave them great credit ratings, and so they sold. And on Wall Street, when you sell, you keep doing the things that are going to make you the most money. Now, he said, like cracks in a building's foundation, the risks seemed minor at first, but high ratings hid the instability of the entire structure until it was too late. And again, we know what happened. We lived through it. First, the financial crisis, and then the recession, which was disastrous for so many people, so many families. A lot of people lost their 401ks or retirements. A lot of people lost their jobs. But you know who it wasn't bad for? Some of those executives of the failed banks who ended up having giant golden parachutes, getting paid millions, sometimes billions of dollars for crashing their company into the ground. So that's why they're doing this. Now, before you ask, hey, wait a minute. Okay, so that happened. Didn't we pass a law to prevent that from happening again? Well, yes, that would be Dodd-Frank. Now, unfortunately, Dodd-Frank is very weak. You had Republicans and corporate Democrats going in and saying, okay, we got this Dodd-Frank law. Let's water it down. It seems like it's too hard on the bank. It's too harsh. They'd learn their lesson. They're not going to do this again, right? So we're just going to let them flout some of these rules. Now, they did that, of course, not because they believed the banks actually learned their lesson. It's because they had millions of dollars in campaign contributions by the finance industry. And because of that, the politicians, they decided they were going to chip away at it. And look, I've been critical of Dodd-Frank because it actually, I don't think it went far enough. But then it started out weak, and then it eventually got watered down to the point of where it was completely, or most completely ineffectual. Okay. Now, the author writes, in the time since it was implemented, the SEC has permitted the agencies to dodge the law. While Dodd-Frank imposed liability on the agencies for false ratings, the SEC exempted them. Likewise, Congress barred the agencies from getting inside information about issuers they rate, but the SEC permitted that too. And last Christmas Eve, the so-called risk retention rule of Dodd-Frank took effect, requiring the arrangers of these complex deals keep a slice of the downside. However, clever financiers arranged for third parties to take on this risk. So what he's saying is that these companies will get other companies to take on their risk for them to negate this rule. Okay, well, if it's not their risk, but all the reward for doing things that might endanger the entire financial system and destabilize it, well, they're still going to go and actually do that because, again, it's all reward, no risk. Oh, boy. And, of course, if you're a financier, what are you going to do? You're going to chase short-term profit every time. And, look, and if that means the riskier loans could sink those third parties, well, hey, man, it's It's their risk, not my risk. Okay, it's not my company. Now, again, he talked about the high credit ratings, right? There's some of these loans getting AAA. Now, it's rather odd that these junk loans would get such a high credit rating, isn't it? I mean, why would they give them? Because, of course, they're in on it, and they explain that they have outdated software. Interesting. The credit rating agencies, particularly Moody's Investors and S&P, are the central actors in the story, just as in the original. The computer programs they use to assign AAA ratings remain flawed. Because loan defaults can come in waves, mathematical models should account for correlation risk, which is the chance that defaults might occur simultaneously, which is what happened in 2008. But the models for CLOs assume correlations are low. When defaults occur at the same time, the supposed AAA investments would be wiped out. He ends up saying CLOs are just CDOs in a new wrap. Now look, I think a lot of you probably know I'm not an expert in financial matters, but I do see some red flags here, and I'm sure you do as well. The first one is, of course, the gutting of regulations like Dodd-Frank. You've got the exemptions. Basically, it means that the financial environment has essentially changed very little since 2008. And if the regulatory environment is the same, and there's no disincentives, there's only incentives to continue doing what they did before, well, why would we expect the banks to act any differently and not do these risky investments and not wrap these up into bad securities? Okay? Especially when there's billions and billions of dollars at stake. I mean, look, going back to one of those recent deals, right? Half of those, half of those deals, right, were made up of junk loans. Junk loans. So, man, that is a red flag. Okay. Now, there's another red flag here. Partnov recently sent a Freedom of Information Act request seeking to identify which credit rating agencies have been found to violate SEC rules. The regulators refuse to divulge names. Violators remain anonymous. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but again, violators don't have the incentive to not violate if they remain anonymous. I mean, imagine the PR if you're a bank and you're like, hey, by the way, you're violating SEC rules. You're violating the rules. You're screwing over the people that you're supposed to work for, which is the consumer, the investor. That's going to make people not want to invest in your company and not want to buy your products, right? Your financial products. Instead, the SEC is now letting them be anonymous. So business as usual. So that's not really a risk. I don't really have to worry about any kind of fallout from buying from when these bad investments explode. Now, there's more, of course. Now, here's an example of some of the hubris on Wall Street. Earlier this month, Ashish Shah, a managing director of Madison Capital Funding, a subsidiary of New York Life, told a roundtable of CLO experts that, hey man, don't worry about defaults. Okay, defaults not going to happen, so keep investing. He said the appetite for assets is ferocious. This does not bode well, man. It's the same kind of stuff that they were saying back before the crash in 2008. Now, again, another red flag. According to the article, many of the least creditworthy businesses are finding it very easy to borrow because their loans, these non-creditworthy agencies are getting these loans very, very easily so they could package them up and sell them again with AAA credit ratings. Now, he also warns that while some might claim CLOs are different or smaller, or that regulators are better prepared today, which I laugh, or that business loans could not possibly default all at once, as home mortgages did. But similar arguments were made about the risks in the early 2000s before they spread to the major banks in AIG, and the markets spiraled out of control. He cautions that during the debates about repealing Dodd-Frank, which is what they were talking about, legislators should keep their eyes on these complex investments and the agencies that facilitate them. And says that if you want to avoid an even bigger crisis, regulators should heed warnings about financial dysfunction and hidden risks now before the cracks spread. So again, that is a pretty dire warning, and this isn't the first time I've heard that warning. And I believe it. I don't think that we fixed the inherent problems that led to the first financial crisis. And in fact, all of the incentives are the same. Banks are still too big to fail. In fact, they're actually even bigger than they were before. Most of the new rules are not in effect. They're actually being sidestepped daily. And now they're treating business loans the same way that they treated home loans. This is not good. Now, look, there's no way that this cannot go bad. Now, look, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that maybe there's something that I'm missing. Again, I'm not an expert in finance, but I can see the warning signs for what they are, and all those signs are there. And this time, if this happens, we're going to have Trump in charge to deal with it. God help us all. If the economy goes with Trump, I don't know how we're going to get out of it. But, and the Republicans, man, full speed ahead on deregulating even more and more of our financial industry, because the banks, man, they got to get paid. And they don't care who they hurt in order to do so. So, Donald Trump was the first iceberg. Here's the second one. Again, we can see it coming. And Republicans are like, full speed ahead. Oh, boy. All right. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Thank you to those who are supporting us on Patreon. Thank you to those who have liked and watched the stream. Don't forget to like it on the way out after the stream. Balance out a couple of haters. Okay. So with that said, we're going to have a great show for you tomorrow. We got a lot more stuff I want to cover. I want to talk about, including the mooch. Where is he going? Where is he at? And a lot of other fun stories that I have yet to plan. So, as well as Donald Trump's new immigration. I'll be talking about that tomorrow as well. So, with that, I'll see you guys later. Love you all. Thank you all very much. And we'll see you tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you tomorrow.